In this video what I want to do is look at upgrading from Bryce 7.0 image-based lighting to Bryce 7.1 true ambience lighting. So this is a scene that I made for Bryce 7.0. It can be found here on brycetutorials.info, Bryce downloads, on my list of downloads, 10 Bryce Pro Landscapes 2, and it's this one here. And the scene is lit with Builder's No sky dome colour. There is ambient. I'm not quite sure what role that's performing in this scene. To test that, just change the colour of it and see if something changes. So it doesn't look like ambience having a lot of influence on the scene, but it is set to an orange colour, something I intend to take advantage of later. If I go into the Skylab, you can see that this is a Bryce Sky generated HDRI backdrop, and that's providing HDRI effect. Now, if as things stand we simply go into the render options, select premium effects, select a fairly low raise per pixel, switch on true ambience, switch from TA focus scattering to TA scattering correction, which came in Bryce 7.1 and is a superior form of true ambience lighting, and we'll switch boost light on, and we'll leave the maximum ray depth at 3, although perhaps 4 would provide better effect, because you've got to remember the light gathering method uses maximum ray depths to determine what level of probing it does on the investigation in the landscape. So now what you immediately notice is this is a very slow render, and then this is on a fairly fast machine as well. I mean, the quality of lighting might be very good, but it's even at 16 rays per pixel, it's taking 3/4 of an hour. And the reason for this is, unlike with a Bryce 7.1 scene where it's been set up with image-based lighting, HDRI lighting, the true ambience optimization will not be checked by default. This is something that occurred in Bryce 7.1. So if you check that now, so it's now, instead of producing direct light from the HDRI backdrop, it's true ambience optimized light, then it should render significantly faster. There you go, 8 minutes 21. But there's a drawback with the boost light selected. With any backdrop, then you'll tend to get quite a lot of noise, although at the point at which it's possible to see this will depend on, you know, rendering a small area. As it happens, because the materials used are very noisy anyway, they've got a lot of bump in them, then the noise generated by that particular rendering method will probably quite low. Another thing to consider is these hexagonal shapes here that are a feature of this landscape have got reflection set in their material settings, and when you incorporate that with the true ambience method, it can really slow things down. And true ambience tends to favour sort of matte surfaces without reflection, partly because it renders faster, mostly because it actually allows it to show the geometry of things. So it works better with complex geometries and fairly matte finished materials. So if we select everything, select all, then I'll deselect this terrain and this plane, so that's the main foreground terrain and the plane that goes to the horizon, and then all these materials for these hexagonal shapes are going to the material lab. You can see there's 100% reflection on those. I'm going to select Bryce Pro Materials DPAC 1. I'll use this weather beaten concrete material here, and that has no reflection in it, so it's a matte material. It does have some specular response. We can see how that looks now and how it affects the render time. So we've carved 3 or 4 minutes off the render time by getting rid of the reflection, and you can see now that it looks a little bit lighter. So at this point what I'm going to do, because it's taken a while to render, is change the document setup. So I'll make it a 4:3 aspect ratio image. I'll make that say 700, see how that looks. So this should speed things up anyway, just by making it smaller, so that's more manageable. And now, because I can, well, I'll just save this first of all. Well, it's a good job I did save it just then, because I made a bit of a mistake then. What happened was, with these things still selected, I went to the create shelf here and hit send to DAZ Studio without really thinking about it, and what happened was it sent all these terrains to DAZ Studio, but which seemed to work, but when it when I'd got the thing in that I'm going to load in DAZ Studio and sent it back, even though I'd only got that selected, it just seemed to tie Bryce up and crash it. And so I'll not make that mistake again, hopefully. So if I deselect everything now and then hit this send to DAZ Studio, I won't be sending anything, but it will launch DAZ Studio and then it will be linked to Bryce. So there you go, you learn a new thing every day, or at least I do. Right, I don't want this figure. What I want is in here, and down at the bottom of this list somewhere is this alien, and my aim is, if I can, to just get him to be sort of waving. If I can just, oh, I seem to have bent his thumb back, sorry. Right, get one hand up in a waving way, put the other hand by his, oops, I can use Control Z. Come on, finger down, right, okay. Put that down by his side. I seem to have managed to not get hold of the control now. It's a bit too far down by his side. I wonder what I can do about that. If I can lift the hand a bit, that's it. And then I want to tilt his head back slightly so he's looking up. There we go. Right, that's good. Okay. Then if I go File and Send to Bryce, it should then go back into my scene and appears to be just there. And now what we can do is make him a bit bigger and move him towards the camera. So I'll use my controls here just to reposition him and rotate him, and hopefully I've got him facing the camera now. I remembered it was his right hand that I'd lifted up. So the next challenge is going to be trying to work out, in this view it's very difficult to tell where his feet are with respect to this terrain. So I'm going to narrow this and lift it up a bit because I tilted his head back so he's like looking at us. And then if I use this control here, so the display modes, hold the mouse key down, keep it depressed, and it'll bring up this list and go to textured shaded. And it'll take a little while to convert depending on the speed of your computer. And then that should give us a means to find out where his feet are. Because of the position of the sun though, I can't really see that, so I'm going to move the sun around so I can see where his feet are, and then I can lift him up. Now the coarseness of the resolution of these terrains means that even though it looks like his feet are on the surface, there could be some lower resolution detail that I can't really see just yet. So there we go. Right, it looks a bit brighter because I've moved the sun round. So I'm just positioning that now with respect to the position of the sun, and I'll rotate the sun back round again to its original position. And at the moment still we're using image-based lighting coupled with true ambience, and because of the boost light, as I said now, because the textures on the alien are quite plain, you can see there's quite a lot of noise in there. This was hidden before because of the noisiness of the materials. So to overcome this, what we'll do is I'll disable the HDRI effect here, so it'll only see what it's getting in the sky, and since it's not being used as a backdrop it won't really be using this image. If we wanted to get rid of this HDRI image altogether, you could switch it off, but that has the drawback of resetting the sky. But if you press Ctrl Z and Ctrl Z again, you crash Bryce. Oops. Well, these things happen. Okay. I'm not having a lot of luck with this one, am I? Right, so I've tried to get more or less back to where I was. I've positioned my alien using the textured shaded wireframe view. I'll go back to the default wireframe view, and I was in the image-based lighting tab there, and I was just about to say you could switch the HDRI off, and then by pressing Ctrl Z and Ctrl Z again, and this time it didn't crash, you should be able to restore the sky settings without the HDRI settings. So now we're in a position where we can go back to putting the sun back where it was to start with, and as you can see that because we've got rid of the HDRI lighting when it was true ambience optimized, we've lost a lot of our shadow detail, if not almost all of the shadow detail. The haze is giving some illusion of that, but if we set things up into a very extreme environment here, then you can see in these shadow areas there's very little light, even though in our render options, if you remember, we're using true ambience and boost light and scattering correction. So the light should be arriving from the environment, but there's just not enough of it to fill in these shadow regions. So at this point we'll employ the trick, if I'm not going to crash it again, of creating a radial light here, and this I'm going to make it huge. So it's now encompassing the entire scene, and it's quite a long way from the camera, so you can't see any transition area where it's clipping the infinite plane, or it's just out of camera shot. We keep making it bigger, it shouldn't really be a problem. Edit that light source. I'm going to switch into true ambience optimization, but because of the way I'm going to use it with the use gel feature, I don't have to worry about the diffuse setting. This intensity control doesn't do anything. I just use gel, procedural, remember to switch it to normal mode, get rid of the diffuse, turn the ambience up and turn the transparency up. The ambience is going to be driven by the ambient channel, which, if you remember, is orange. So this should provide orange ambient light that's actually being cast into the scene, so it will generate its own complex shadow regions. The last thing to do to get this to work for us is to go into include and select include background. This means that everything in the scene is going to be excluded, so we don't have any diffuse generated true ambience light coming in, which would squash the effect and create a lot of noise. So at this point now we should see immediately we get a lot more ambient light in the scene. If we want to create more of this ambient light, to do this what you have to do is copy and paste the light source, then just make it slightly smaller so that the two sources aren't coincident, and then you can increase the amount of light that's providing still further. So if you wanted to have a great deal of ambient light, that's the way to do it. You can't turn the effect up otherwise and still retain the colour that you've got. As we're already using a premium effect here, then you can take advantage of other premium effects like soft shadows and not have too much of an overhead. So if I go into the Skylab here and go Sun Moon, I can turn shadow softness on for the sun. So this is our only direct light source here, and it's just providing this bit of a, what we call, I think they're called rim light, that's coming along the edge of the figure and on the landscape, just to provide a bit more definition there. But otherwise all this area has been filled in by the true ambience lighting now, as it's being provided from that light source mostly. I mean, there's a little bit coming from the sky anyway, because it works with all available light. I'll just try lowering the sun still further so I've got even longer shadows, and makes this a bit of a finer edge there. So that's the effect. As you can see, the noise level is not unacceptable. I mean, it's not brilliant, but it's not unacceptable even at only 16 raised per pixel. If we turn the effect right up, it should more or less eliminate any of the noise, and that would conclude my render. I'm just wondering if I should have a little bit more sunlight and a bit less ambient light. Now I could control the ambient colour lighting here as well, so I can turn it down here. I just can't really turn it up here above this level, so obviously it starts to affect the colour that's generated. So I turn it down, make it a bit darker, just put some more contrast back in the image there, and then I could go to the Sun Moon control and increase the direct diffuse light there, and that'll just change the characteristics slightly of the scene. And if this landscape was supposedly quite small, perhaps the alien's quite small, then I could also include depth of field effect as well without really any significant overhead compared with what we're already doing with the lighting. So these are all things to consider when you're using the premium effects. It allows you to use more and more of them because it's already doing the additional sampling anyway. Right, so to generate a final render, which is what I'll do now, though I was thinking that perhaps I could produce a bit of extra fill light on this side. I don't know. We'll see how it looks there anyway. So if I go to render options and I'll turn it right up, we'll see how long this is going to take at its highest setting. I may not necessarily stick with this, we'll just have a look at what it's like. So like I said, already with the fairly bumpy materials, then it probably wouldn't be too bad to set it at a lower setting. So that's going to take an hour 12. So probably a bit unnecessarily over the top here. 64 should be about a quarter of the time then, I would think. Let's see. So what's this going to be? About 13 minutes. Okay, well, I'll let that render out and we'll have a look how it looks when it's rendered. Well, I've been watching this render. I've been thinking that this figure's getting a little bit lost in this background, so I wondered if I could change the lighting at this point just to really emphasize that. So what I thought I would do, I'll just turn the render options and turn the raise per pixel down to preview this, is select the, it's already selected the inner radial light here, edit it, go to the procedural and place this ambient color under the control of the texture I made before. So there's this rainbow texture, it's already loaded it, and it's at 20%, and the mapping mode is spherical, so it's been kind to me there. I didn't have to set much up because I'd already got it set in the category where it had only got 2 to choose from anyway. Well, actually, thinking about it, I'm going to change that to 10%, so it only does one complete cycle. Go into the deep texture editor and I'll make the light blue, so it'll be half blue and half not coloured at all, not providing any light. And then with that one set up like that, I'm going to change the global ambience to, I'll find out what that colour is first of all, 1647217. I'll change that to white, select the other radial light, edit it and go into the gel and then set this to 1647217. So that's the colour that the global ambient was set to. So that should now be providing a mixture of orange and this blue light. And now I need to work out what direction the blue light's coming from. So I'll shrink the sphere down. Has that shrunk the orange sphere or the blue sphere? I think I've shrunk the wrong one. I'll just press Ctrl Z. Yes, I did. I want the radial light 2. That's the one with the directional ambient light on it. So if I shrink that down, I should be able to see that it's coming from this corner here. So I rotate that round so it's coming from the other side. So I want to fill in some light on this side because I've already got the light arriving from the sun. And then I'm going to choose a colour. I'm going to modify the setting here in the procedural, and I'll choose a colour with more green in it because the alien skin is green, so it should pick some of that up. So if I make this a blue colour, then the alien skin will respond to it a bit better. And then I've got some light arriving from this side as well to help with the modelling. And then there's this transition zone here, which is where the edge of the sphere is clipping it, but it's just disappearing into the haze. So if I set the size of the sphere down a bit and get a bit more directional light on my scene here, so it makes the lighting more interesting and a bit more complex. And I've got another light source, albeit a gentle one, arriving on this side to help define the figure and maybe pick it out a bit more from its background. And maybe I'll try swinging the sun round a little bit and see what effect that has. So I'm just trying to make it a bit clearer to see the figure against this background, and then lower the sun down so it's at a nice low angle, so it's clipping the figure but it's leaving a lot in shadow, so we're making the most of the true ambience lighting that we've got working. And right, I'll see how that looks. I'll give that a render now. So I'll set the render options back up, 64 raise per pixel, and give that a render. Let's see what it's going to take. Shouldn't take any longer. A little bit longer. Well, it's a bit random when it does that. So first pass is not always the most reliable. I tend to take these figures with a pinch of salt anyway. Right, about 15 minutes. So I'll just pause there. Okay, as you can see, that's getting there, and it's looking better. What I have noticed is that there's some holes in the side here, which means that I've forgotten to set this terrain. This is entirely my own fault here, to solid, and I should have done that before, and that will fill those holes in. But what I was also thinking was this area here is looking quite a nice detailed area, so I was wondering if, at the risk of just fiddling around with things for the sake of it, we could move the alien into this area with some more detail and see how that looks. So I've switched it over to the OpenGL mode again. I'll get hold of the alien. Now it's quite difficult to slide him around in the wireframe directly as you would do under normal circumstances, but you can move him with this control. So if I was to grab hold of him directly, what tends to happen is that it pulls the figure apart, which is not much use. So it's just have to get used to using these controls up here and working out which direction things are going in. Also the drawback, as I explained, with the level of detail of these, it is very helpful to have this control. I'm just trying to decide whether I should move in or zoom in. I think I'm going to narrow the field of view, even though I liked having those things in the background. Set the render options down so I can see, get a preview of how things look, and have him in this rather complex looking environment with this fine detail here. The main problem is going to be getting him to stand on anything, because he'll get his feet stuck in the terrain. So this is now the new challenge. So let's see how that looks there. Is there a gap for him to stand in, or is he getting his feet stuck in the terrain? Hard to tell. I'll try him over here. I'll just get him on top of one of these. Right, now I picked the figure up and you can see what happened. He's become separated from the other bits of himself, so I should make sure I select the entire alien and move it around with these controls. It's very easy to forget to do that when you're so used to being able to operate in the default wireframe. Things move around a lot. It's a lot easier to get hold of things. You don't have that problem so much. So my difficulty with this view is getting a surface on which you can stand. So maybe I'll pull the camera back a bit and see if I can find, just change the viewing angle slightly. I'll get some of these distant ones in and maybe find a bit of a flatter surface to stand him on. Well, I suppose there, maybe it's a bit too far off to one side as far as composition is concerned. We'll give it a go and see how it looks. So if I can get him into position, turn him so he's looking at us, lower him down a bit, see if stop him from clipping too much into these other objects. So if I preview this area here, you see that stone's over the top of his foot there. I thought that might be happening. Okay, well it doesn't seem to be running into anything now, and just the question is whether he's on actual ground level or below ground level. If I sink his feet in slightly, we'll see whether they're sinking. Yes, they are. It's just a bit fiddly getting all this set up. Right, so now because I've moved the camera around, there's more light on him, so that's made him a bit more visible, and it's changed the emphasis of the lighting slightly. So I'll move that around. Don't particularly want the shadow of his hand to fall across his face. That's the other thing I'm trying to avoid here. I know that's somewhat rather outside the concerns of what this tutorial is really about, but since I've got this far, I'll try and do it right. Okay, I'll have a quick render of that. So in this case now, we've got the cyan light arriving from the gel. Well, actually it's controlled in the ambient. The texture controls where the ambient light's coming from the right hand side here, so you can see it's actually filling in on the figure there. The orange light from the ambient channel through the ambient colour in the outer light source, and the direct light from the sun. So now we'll give this a go. I'm just going to move the camera slightly around so that it's not that close to the edge. If I can just bring it in a little bit. Okay, right, so I really will have to stop fiddling with this. I'll just go on forever otherwise. Set that back up at 64 rays per pixel. I imagine the render time will be once again about 15 minutes. So I'll just pause that there and see how it goes. So to recap then, since it's all been a bit fiddly and a bit crashy, if you're going to do things like summon figures from DAZ Studio, probably best to save your scene just before you do that, in case you make a mistake like I did. And also, if you're going to do things like try and get rid of the HDRI, then it's also a good idea. If you're going to use that option, then use Ctrl Z. In fact, any option where you're using Ctrl Z repeatedly, it's probably best to start and save before you do that. If I've been working with terrains and I've had multiple terrains in the scene and I Ctrl Z too many times, and then that can cause problems. So it's always handy to keep saving. So I'm up to save number 5 with this scene as things stand. As far as the lighting is concerned, don't think that any one particular form of lighting is best. Each has their strengths and weaknesses. In this case, we started with image-based lighting, which worked perfectly well in the scene, because a lot of this texture was reflective, and when you've got reflective it doesn't really need the ambient light because it's reflecting its environment, so you're getting information about the geometry of things from the reflections. But when you change to a matte material, I'm looking at this area in particular, then the more complex lighting provided by ambient light here really shows up the geometry. You have the subtle shadow regions and quite subtle lighting. No direct lighting is arriving, the sun's skimming over the top of that portion. Then matte materials, complex geometries, think in terms of using true ambience light to get the best out of your scene, and likewise if you've got reflective materials or you've got a need for high dynamic range lighting, which probably wouldn't suit the TA render mode of boost light, would generate a lot of noise, then obviously a different render mode would be more suitable in that situation. So as I say, it's not a matter of one lighting method being superior to another, it's just a matter of selecting the correct method for the scene you want to produce.